I think, a lot of people dream of owning their own business or retiring to Florida, and, they have this great plan, and then they buy shitty, crappy insurance. And I've seen the homeowners that moved to Florida before the 3 storms, and they're out of there, right? That was the worst decision they ever made because they had a bad plan. And, when you retire as a police officer, you retire from and you want to start a fun business like a shooting range, and, they're really risking their retirement. And, a good plan, a good partner with the proper, approach. And that means, again, if you're going to rent guns, you need to do it in a way where, you think ahead of the ball.
Welcome to the I Hate Insurance podcast with my dad, Rick, and I don't know our guest's name. Mike, what do you
Petersen.
do?
So I own a couple businesses. I own a laser cutting and metal fabrication facility here in Linden. It's called Critical Laser. And then I own a shooting range construction and equipment manufacturer. So we do quite a bit of federal law enforcement, military, state, local law enforcement, and commercial, and even private residential ranges.
And today on the podcast, we just cover all kinds of coverages. And if you want to learn a lot about the ins and outs of insurance, stick around and listen to the conversation today.
Gun collections and taxidermy collections. And he issues them on a master policy. And so he can cover your guns and your taxidermy collection. And, again, he's designed a product because he's found a niche where homeowners policies don't want to cover firearms and taxidermy. Normally it's a separate policy. So, I've never heard of him. He calls me and wants to, expand what he does. He wants to add jewelry and other non-hunting stuff, which his current carrier, which is a German-based company, they like his little niche, right? He writes about $1.2 million in premium a year, says the loss ratio is like 30%, which means it's probably closer to 60,
Okay.
which is a break even. But, in most cases, it's lower limits. Right, and insurance companies like lower limits and bigger premiums because that's one of the ways that they historically think, you cover stuff. But I would tell you again that, most homeowners policies like State Farm, Allstate, all the guys running out of California, running out of Hawaii, they won't write in Florida, they won't write in Louisiana. To me, that shows they really don't want any risk, right? As an underwriter that's trying to be competitive with the State Farms and the Allstates and American families, you have to be cheaper. So how are you cheaper? Well, you don't cover earthquake, you don't cover flood, you've excluded the dog.
So you're leaving critical components out of the policy.
Yeah,
Okay.
But they say, well, we're giving the client what they want, right? So again, when a client buys a policy and doesn't understand what's not covered, that's what I tell everybody, right? You want cheap. Okay, so if you buy cheap, what's not covered is the most important thing, and that is what creates all the litigation when you have a dog bite. And then your agent says, oh, dogs aren't covered. Why didn't you make that clear to me at the time you sold it to me?
Yeah, when I got my homeowner's negligence clause or whatever.
Right, yeah. And so they don't want to ruin the sale. And I compare it to, countrywide home loans and the whole nightmare with mortgages. How did that go so bad? Because the guys making money from placing the loans, the agents or brokers, they had no tie to the end result. If the plane crashed, if they sell you a ticket on a plane they know is going to crash, they don't care. It crashes. They got their money.
Right.
Right. And that's one of the big lessons from the mortgage crisis was, don't let people make a lot of money that have no skin in the game, right? That's
Sure.
just, any good partner is based on us sharing risk together, right? One of us takes risk and the rest don't. There's no way that's a good partnership. So the way I've always done insurance is I save people's businesses, or I save their event because they can't get insurance. The normal market has said, you're uninsurable. And so you don't design a product for them, you custom fit it, right? Now, the old school, when they've done that, Lloyds, did it in the 90s. They insured Marilyn Monroe's legs and stuff like that. But again, what does the policy actually say? What can't she do? When aren't they going to pay? That's the fine print. And when I deal with people, I'm like, I've been doing this too long to shoot in the dark. If you want my help, and I don't need to write anybody's insurance, and I got plenty of good clients, and if somebody wants the truth, then I got to tell you what you're not covered for. So you got to let me look up your skirt, or you're asking me to shoot in the dark. And shooting in the dark in insurance or with a firearm, it's not a real good idea. Right. So again, the Rolling Stones concert during COVID is the biggest event that, as a kid or as a young businessman 35 years ago, I didn't think there was a chance in hell I would ever write the Rolling Stones concert. That's what Lloyds of London and
the real big guys
would have done it before.
Sure.
And here's COVID. Nobody will do it. They need it. They wouldn't have done the event. And, I used common sense. I didn't use an actuary to tell me statistically, what's he going to tell me? I'm going to pay him a bunch of money. If Keith or Mick would have died, I would have had to pay $10 million. If the events would have been canceled for COVID cancellation, I would have had to pay $10 million.
Okay.
So the limit was $10 million. So I wanted to talk to Mick and Keith, which I did. I wanted to talk to their doctors, and I wanted to agree that the events would take place if they capped it to 50% occupancy, right? Because in some events, they were saying you can't have 100%, you can have 75. And, that's what they wanted. We negotiated 50. They would still hold an event because they're the Rolling Stones. 50% occupancy, they're still making money. So, it was.
What was the actual occupancy? Do you remember?
Well, it was 100%.
I was going to say.
They didn't limit it at any of the events. But, I knew what cities, right? The tour had cities. Right. It wasn't Portland. Right. The most concerning one, I think, was L.A., and they actually had 2 concerts in L.A. They added a second one because of the demand. So, it was hugely successful. They obviously did distancing. They didn't meet anybody backstage and stuff. So there was a lot of things that didn't make it as risky as everybody thought. And, my career started in 85, insuring the uninsurable, helicopter ski guides, rafting companies, mountain climbing, trips to Mount Everest, and, very safe, very professional people. They were, kind of told they were uninsurable. When you tell people they're uninsurable, the good ones kind of perk up and say, well, that can't be true. And that's what I believe from day one, that because a lawyer sues you and throws a bunch of crap up against the wall doesn't mean you don't have a fair shake. You need an insurance company willing to invest the money and execute to the end to get you the best result, which is fighting frivolous litigation and winning costs you more money. And I took a case to the Supreme Court in California in 1988 called Sains versus Whitewater Voyages that everybody said release forms are no good, you can't win. Well, I took it to the Supreme Court and won. And it's still upheld today nationwide as the lead case in release forms.
I was going to ask, what's the basis of the case?
Well, the guy fell out of the boat on a 3-day trip and drowned. And, he he liked falling out of the boat, and it was a whitewater raft trip, and he would fall out on purpose. And on raft trips, a lot of people go swimming.
Sure.
And, they can have a heart attack, whatever. You don't get money for that. That's inherent to the activity, right? If you sign a release form and the outfitter increases the risk, like let's say he hits you in the head with an oar and knocks you out, then a release form is no good. So release forms are like any other contract. They're enforceable as long as the facts are in your favor. And if they're not, they're not going to absolve you of gross negligence. So, now today, in 85, motocross tracks couldn't get coverage. And over the years, we insured fewer and fewer motocross tracks, and the AMA has a huge program. They've insured everybody. Well, Parker and I are on this round table of motocross tracks because they can't get coverage anymore. And the old school insurance guys who have mismanaged their claims for the last 10 years are telling them they're uninsurable again. And kids can't ride and all the stuff that I proved wrong in 1985. So, you can slip back into your old ways if you seek the cheapest insurance policies. And that's what I believe the AMA's done. The program that insures the motocross now will do the big stuff like Nitro Circus,
right?
And, the Supercross events, but any of the other tracks,
they're not doing the little stuff.
Yeah, if we come to your track, we'll bring insurance and use it for the day or two, and then we leave. Well, how good of a track can you have if you're only open the day or two that the AMA comes to town?
Right, but the track itself still can't get coverage.
Right. Well, we're offering coverage. And,
okay.
We were on this call. It's a live Zoom call. You can go on and watch. And, again, if you do the right thing as a business and your insurance supports that, you can manage litigation and save on every claim. Or you can mismanage it like a bad divorce where the lawyers take a bunch of money out of the pool of money because you don't know what you're doing, right? So this story, the Zoom call, there was a plaintiff's lawyer on there that said to all these motocross tracks, I'm your worst nightmare. I'm the guy who got a $22 million judgment, right? So he had a guy.
That's his badge of honor.
Yeah, and he's telling his story like, I'm your worst nightmare. And, this guy was grossly negligent in the way he operated his track. And, he had slides that he put on to the jury and did all this to get a $22 million judgment. And he kept saying that, $22 million judgment. And finally I said, quit saying that, right? That's a fake judgment. You can never get $22 million. So my guess is this guy didn't have insurance and you took his land.
Yeah.
And I said, what was his land worth? $500,000. I says,
that's what you got.
If he would have had insurance with me, so this guy, was a closed day. There wasn't anybody there except this one guy he allowed to come ride there. And his daughter was there taking pictures. And the guy was in the middle of the track working on his traco, and it was in Georgia, a wooded area, and he hit a tree, and this tree fell. And if it would have fallen 1 second sooner, the guy would have been by it. 1 second later, the guy would have hit the tree with the motorcycle, but it was perfectly timed, hit him in the head and killed him. So this guy wasn't grossly negligent. That's an accident, like a truck accident on the highway, or, I see it every day. He was trying to make it out like this guy was, he lied on the stand. Yeah, because he was scared. He didn't buy insurance because he's confused and he thinks, I'll form a corporation and that'll protect me.
Hide
well,
everything,
a corporation with no insurance is a fake corporation, and they get through to you personally. So, again, everybody that picks bad partners ends up in a different place than when you pick good partners. And we all learn that on the playground as kids or in sports, right? You can't do as good alone as you can with good partners and a good team. That's what I learned from sports in the playground. If you all work together, you might not be the best individual athletes, but you can overcome the best individual with crappy team around him because they don't like him. So again, I told the lawyer, I said, I would have paid you, right? This was one of those things where it's an accident. He didn't wake up and think, I want to kill this guy today. I know it. I do with truck accidents, same thing. I know they didn't want to do that. It's a sad accident. So I would have just paid you. And he said what I've known for 40 years, that nobody believes me. Lawyers won't tell you. He would have had to have taken my offer because that would have been his best day, right? Now he has land. The land, would cash for that same amount be better? Hell yeah. His client, so he would have to take it or he would be in bad faith, which is what they threaten insurance companies with all the time. You're in bad faith, and that's why insurance companies
So
get
there's the
nervous.
legal obligation in that case if there's an offer on the table to take that offer back to their client,
Yeah.
and then
Well,
the client can decide whether or not
Well,
this or that. But he's got to bring all the information, right? He should have to lay it out. Hey, look, this guy doesn't have insurance. All he's got is the truck, the backhoe, and the land.
Right.
So if there's $3 million on the table, that's a better offer than the $700,000 you're going to get for this thing.
Right.
Okay.
And, a lawyer on Zoom recorded says, by law, I would have to take it, right? I've been telling, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to college, right? So I'm the dumb Utah high school graduate calling the legal system out on how, they don't do the right thing, right? I got to investigate it. Give me a retainer. And you know exactly what happened within a week on that case. You go tender the policy. They would have to take it. The guy would still have his motocross track. And, again, he would be a better motocross track owner than he ever was before.
Sure.
So, learning from your mistakes is what you want people to do. That's what plaintiffs' lawyers sue people for is, they're making an unsafe car. I agree with that, right? People who do wrong shit should pay for it. But when it's an accident, you learn from it and you move on. And, there is a legal system with guardrails. The plaintiffs' lawyers have pushed it out to where bad faith is $10 million, right? And so they're scared. We have the same counter move on this side, but you have to be timely. It's a very short window. If you wait too long, then they don't have to take the offer, right? They can, in my boat accident where somebody ran into my boat and they were wrong, the other carrier, Travelers, outright denied liability for 2 years. And I spent $70,000 fighting with them. And then after 2 years, they say, okay, we're going to admit liability now. So tell me why it takes 2 years to admit liability when you're liable. Under maritime law, if I'm tied up to the dock and you're moving, you're
It's
liable.
your fault. Yeah.
That's an elision. You're at fault. So, Travelers assigns it out to some adjuster. Well, his incentive is to try and, be a hero for Travelers. Come up with some angle that you're not liable. No, that's a bad idea. You're not treating people the way you want to be treated. So if you claim you're a good neighbor, be a good neighbor. Don't read the contract.
What's their financial benefit by pushing it out 2 years?
Well, they assign it out, right?
Okay.
Instead of they assign a third-party administrator, a TPA, just like on every storm claim, and the guy shows up with a clipboard. And, he's going to take 6 months to come up with your bid to repair your house. Well, funny, because the contractors will give you a bid today, right? So you make them go get 3 bids normally, and then you make them pick the cheapest one. I think you ought to pick the best one. Shouldn't be the cheapest one. But, again, everybody, instead of doing the right thing, thinks they're doing their job. And every time you outsource a project, they can sit there and say, well, I did my job, right? I can't do those reports. Well, you could get 3 bids from contractors, and then you don't have to do your report. But why are you doing a report? Maybe you should have underwritten it in the beginning. If it's an old roof, if there's too many trees around it, you should have told them that when you wrote the policy. But instead, everybody kind of closes their eyes, like a mortgage lender, and they do crappy stuff. Just like in California now, the fires down there, it's a bigger nightmare than Florida ever thought of being, because it's everybody, right? And there is no reconstruction. I think I heard last week they got 11 permits, 16,000 homes or something burnt, and none of them have proper coverage. They probably don't have enough coverage on their building, but they have 50% of their building in contents, which most people don't have. I don't have 50% contents. And if the contents is 10 years old, it's depreciated and worth nothing anyway.
Worth zero anyway.
So, now the lawyers are going to be arguing for 100% payment on everything, which everybody's mad.
Right.
So they're like, you can do that? Yeah, we'll argue for the biggest number. And again, it's going to be 5 to 10 years. The lawyers are going to get rich. And it's because the insurance companies didn't want to do the whole job, right? So again, insurance is designed like cans of corn or Snickers bars, right? They're packaged and they're pretty much the same. It's like SKUs. Like if you're a swimsuit company, how many SKUs do you got? Well, we're not actually doing anything but issuing a policy. So how hard is it to customize? I guess, it'd be like a tailor shop where you go get, custom fit clothes. Does anybody want to do that anymore? Not really. But with insurance, I think that's really the only way to do it. And the biggest fundamental problem is multiple policies, because that's always the insurance industry's solution. Like if you own a firearms company, or you own a shooting range or a gunsmith, they will cover your operations, but they don't want your products liability, or they don't want the assault and battery, or they don't want sexual abuse and molestation. So I get calls all the time now, and it's like, hey, do you offer hired and non-owned auto, right? You can get auto coverage from your regular carriers, but hired and non-owned is where claims come in out of the side that they don't expect. So that's like a separate policy. And I'm like, you understand that's like, that's not helpful, right? The more policies you have, the higher cost you have, and everybody's trying to do part of the job, which you can't do. You can't do half of the job, right? So our approach is all in one. If I issue your homeowners, I'm covering earthquake, wind, flood, fire, anything that happens. Your dog, your trampoline. If you have a watercraft policy, a boat policy, it doesn't cover you towing people. Well, most guys I know that have boats tow people. So, those are things that you need to actually look at. And if you have a homeowners and a boat, why do you need a separate boat policy? It's part of your home, right? It's part of your assets, all your four-wheelers, all your jet skis.
Yeah, and I would say as somebody, who owns a business and homes and looks at insurance, I'm just asking my insurance guy what's in there.
Right.
If I told you I was reading my whole policy, I wouldn't be being honest.
Right.
Like, I'm not reading my whole policy. Right. I'm trusting whoever my agent is to tell me, look, what's happening with my policy, what's in it. And that's a great example. Hey, look, we're covering your boat here, but if you're towing, the neighbor kids on the tube, that's actually not in your policy.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, if your insurance doesn't cover it, you have to. So if, without any of this stuff, like the concealed carry, market, which I've been suspicious of for the last 10 years. And now I think it's becoming obvious that the products that are out there fall short, right? So if you buy concealed carry or firearms policy from any of them, it doesn't cover you at work, right? So what good is it, right? So Our policy, our approach is if we insure you, and if you call me up and say, Rick, I just want firearms, right? I just want my concealed carry. I'm like, okay, well, what if you punch the guy? What if you stab the guy, right? Firearm policy is too narrow, right? So let's look at your life, work, home, and play, and let's, your dog isn't covered. I know that. Your firearm isn't covered. Assault and battery isn't covered. Any alleged crime isn't covered, which is the problem with most of the firearms policies. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty. And most of the policies that are out there say if you're accused of a crime. So they're jumping ahead of the legal system and saying if you're accused of a crime, we're not covering it. So I've been in that position. I was actually accused of felony assault on an officer in Chicago. So I know what you want, right? And I fought it. And then I sued the city and the cops, and I won a judgment. That's what a good neighbor does. Most people would defend you, then pay, and wouldn't sue to protect your reputation, right? So same in my boat claim. I didn't want to claim with Jake at State Farm. I wanted Travelers to pay the damages, which they are liable for. They ran into me. Well, Jake at State Farm didn't help me. He basically made me hire my own lawyer and cost me $70,000 to preserve my right. They offered me like a fourth of what it cost to fix the boat. They sent me checks, and I'm like, I didn't ask you for any checks. But they're reading the policy saying, well, we only owe you $10,000 for transportation. I'm like, you owe me nothing. They will pay the whole thing if we're acting like good partners.
Sure.
But they're reading a policy. They're not acting like a partner or a neighbor. So, you're really, as an insurance company, and I remember in the rafting business, one lawyer said to me, we're not in the rafting business. I'm like, well, when you insure rafters, you are in their
You are in
business.
the rafting business.
Unless you're going to abandon us, like State Farm and all the California. We're a homeowners carrier. No, they're not. They're leaving the state. They don't want to deal with the problems. And so, again, as an industry, there's an opportunity to do different. And historically, the government did flood insurance. The government does terrorism. And, the insurance companies look at the government and say, that's too big a risk for us to take. No, it isn't. If we depend on the government, who pays that anyway? We're the government.
Sure.
So, the government should tell the insurance industry, look, do not tell us you can't accept the risk. If you can't accept the risk, don't accept the premium. If you're going to go broke when the storm comes,
don't take the money.
Don't take the money. So, don't shoot low. That'd be like contractors or firearms builders or machine shop shooting low where you can't produce the product you're being asked to produce. That's stupid. So fundamentally, people need a new approach, right? You're covered at work, home, and play. I call it, copying Trump here, call it the golden dome of protection.
Okay.
For personal or business, right? And with me and you have a homeowner's policy, but my homeowner's policy really needs to include my business acts because I have people at my house.
Sure.
Personal and business, you don't have the line that you used to have when your dad went to the machine shop at General Motors or whatever. Everybody's life is 24/7. If you're a cop, you're off duty, whether the department covers you or not, you want to be covered. What if you're, acting security for the Jazz on the weekend, right?
Right.
You want to always know you're covered. And now I always tell truck drivers and the owners of the motor carriers, I tell them, look, we insure both of you. We insure the motor carrier, the trucking company, and the driver, right? We're a team. And so, most of the time they say, I fired that driver. I fire anybody who has an accident. I'm like, well, that's not a good idea because they're part of our team, right? And we have them. Well, what if they test positive? I'm like, well, then you still treat them like you would want to be treated. And you say, look, we're going to have to fire you. We don't really have a choice now. You've put us in a tough position, but we're going to hire you a criminal lawyer, because that's what that driver's now worried about, is he's now out in the, on the ground flopping around like a fish out of water. He doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer, and he definitely isn't going to be a good partner for you when you leave him flopping around. And you wouldn't do that to your kid, right? If you were a kid, you'd say, tough love, I can't really do anything except hire you a criminal lawyer, and you got to learn from this experience, just like anything else. If you learn from it, could be a great day in your life. If you keep, blaming everybody else, and again, firing him, it's really not a choice. If he didn't test positive and it was just an accident, why would you fire somebody that has an accident? He might not have another accident for 10 years, and you go fire him and you hire a new guy that's not even as good as he was. So, insurance companies are, I think, at the root of that, saying, oh, you have to hire people with this. I tell people, look, you're the one running the trucking company. You're the one running the range. Who do you want to hire? Why would I tell you? Right? In some cases, the new guy you can train is way better than the guy that has all the years of experience that won't listen to you. And I see that in my own business.
For sure. Yeah.
So, flexibility is the key. And if you're a partner, you empower your partner to make good decisions, which means you really don't tell them what to do. You might agree on a strategy, and then you might have some new experiences where you should change that strategy and say, well, why don't we do this? New drivers in any commercial auto is an issue, and community colleges partner up with a lot of our people, and they have a 6-month short program, simulators, and they train them. And then we will let our trucking companies, trash companies, tow companies hire them. And then they get trained by the owner for 30 days, right? But normally the requirement is you need 3 years experience. Well,
where do you get it?
Yeah, you can't get it. It's almost like the motocross tracks. Yeah. Until you're 16, you can't ride. Well, how do you think you're going to get kids at 16? And kids are resilient. I worry about the old guys out me, like they're riding more than I do the young kids. Anyway, I think that the gun industry is obviously, always been under attack and always continue to be under attack. And we've insured, ranges and dealt with suicides with rented guns and all the stuff. And, there's a way to do it. And decisions that you make in operating that create more risk or less risk, those are really business owner decisions that you need a insurance company partner with. And in anything, it's really, there's a standard of care, right? It's like liquor, right? You can serve liquor. Where you cross the line is where somebody's visibly intoxicated and you serve them more. So, video cameras we use, and when sad accidents happen, we use the video to show you weren't visibly intoxicated when you were at our facility. And that's pretty much the end of it. So, firing, gun ranges, people coming and going. We had one today where, they don't want cameras inside, but we required them to at least have cameras on the gates where people are coming and going so we know who came and went. The more information you have, and I've dealt with it. There's a lot of truckers that say, I don't want cameras. And I'm like, okay, you're going to pay more because anybody can sue you frivolously. And we can't really, it's he said, she said.
Yeah.
And so, we learned that in skating rinks back in the 80s was there's a lot of claims where people fall and slip and it's their fault and they want to blame you. And the video cameras eliminate it immediately. So, video cameras are something that I don't want to force on you, but I can tell you that you're going to pay at least 10% more because you won't put cameras in.
Oh, I'm trying to get as many as I can get. I mean, at both of our businesses, as many cameras as I can have, I'm interested. But But I think inside the gun industry, what is interesting is there is, I don't want to say fringe because that sounds negative, but there's a section of the gun owners and gun range owners that are, they don't want evidence of them, in gun shops and doing, because there's been a few. I just saw yesterday there was one of the news agency was talking about an active shooter situation. They had pulled up the footage of the guy buying guns, 2 weeks before, and all of a sudden the gun range is getting bad press for having sold this guy the gun, right? And the ammo, which the guy who came in to buy the gun and the ammo was perfectly legal in doing that, right? The gun range owner is not a bad actor in that light, but they're sure getting the bad press.
Well, but even if you didn't have the video, they would still tell you where the gun was bought or whether it was bought legally or not. So, again, I think that when you have the opportunity to, head it off at the pass early, like when, a shooting happens or a car accident happens, in most cases, it's like two parties that should touch base, right? Like when somebody dies helicopter skiing or backcountry skiing or at your range, we should reach out to the family and start communicating with them. And that's what normally doesn't happen, right? Because most insurance companies would tell people don't say anything or don't do anything.
Is that a liability concern?
Yeah, they're worried you're going to admit liability or something.
A CI, what is that? CYA tactic?
Right? So, reaching out, you don't admit liability, you don't deny liability. You just say, look, I'm a business owner.
Sure.
I'm here trying to figure this out, do the right thing. I want to be transparent. And, you can always get a lawyer. I'm not telling you to get a lawyer, not get a lawyer, but I'm here to do the right thing. And, I'm not hiding from you. And in most cases, again, that's what doesn't ever happen, right? Even in car accidents, you exchange information, you both report it to your own company, and then you start getting upset with each other, and it becomes a big nightmare that sucks the life out of you, just like my boat claim did, right? It wasn't made. I would have been better off not having insurance because I would have just done what I did, right? But when you have insurance and it compounds the problem, it just is, very disappointing and obviously not a good look for insurance. We should be making happy customers, right? And like you talked about California wildfires, people are down there, same with Hawaii. They're like, where's the government? And I'm thinking, where's your insurance company?
Where's your insurance company?
Their checkbook.
Yeah.
Your house is burnt to the ground. The contents is gone. Everything's gone. You should just come write a check. But, again, are they ever going to give you the full limit on your contents? I doubt it, right?
Yeah.
But the building, they should just write you a check for the building. That would go so far with all the people down there in California, or I would bet you none of them have any payments yet, right? And
you think it's that bad?
Oh yeah. I've talked to people. There's business owners that
we're a year or more down the road, and you don't think people have gotten checks for their houses?
It's quite a year. It might be, but
That's wild.
I don't think anybody's got any money. A lot of them are with the Fair Plan, and the Fair Plan, from what I know, doesn't have any money. It's a government program. I think at one point they had, you remember the numbers, Park, when the $200 million in cash and $381 billion in losses or something.
We talked about it on one of the episodes. Like they have like $300 million in risk or something, and $20 million or something.
But any government plan, whether it's the flood program or Citizens of Louisiana or Citizens of Florida or the Fair Plan in California, they don't have enough coverage. The plan is we'll assess everybody, And they are assessing.
But it's not solvent.
No, there's no way they couldn't write all the checks if they had to. So, again, events are way bigger. People say, what scares you about being in the insurance business? And, when I was smaller, when I would have a bad accident, somebody seriously injured or killed, those were my worst days. But when I started my own insurance company, Katrina, a catastrophe event like that is really the only thing that threatens you as a big insurance company. Because it's, if you insure 1,000 trucks, not all 1,000 trucks are going to wreck into each other.
Sure.
Right. So, you insure 1,000 houses and they're all damaged by a storm. You have to, have a real plan. And I think that, again, a lot of insurance is based on, we're going to do this and the worst will never happen. Oh, and we exclude earthquake and they're getting floods somewhere else. And they think that's smart because it reduces their peril exposure. But the litigation exposure, if they would just pay the claim, it would be cheaper than the litigation money that's being spent.
Yeah, for sure.
Everything.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a common mindset though, right? Like the ability to think, it's not, that's not going to happen to us. Like that's right. That's not.
When you're young, you think that. I talk to people all the time.
Oh yeah.
Say, I'm never going to have a claim. I just want a piece of paper. And I'm like, I can introduce you to 100 or 1,000 guys that I would have bet would never have a claim either. And the fact that they had a claim doesn't mean they did anything wrong or they're a bad risk. It was just, it's like that tree falling and hitting that guy in the head. Like literally seconds.
Sure.
Right? And for whatever reason at that one time, and I guarantee you there was 100 close calls like that of other shit that, didn't go that bad. But that's, life, you can't really predict it. And as you get older, like with everything, every firearms training, every police officer training, you're training to be prepared when it does happen. You hope that it doesn't, right? With insurance, you never actually train and prepare or test it, right? And then when it is tested, at least from my 43 years doing this, it rarely works, right? Like I don't know of any times where it's worked, right? Mudslides, sinkholes, tornadoes, tornadoes and sinkholes and mudslides, they're so small that it doesn't hit the news. I can't remember the town in Oklahoma that was wiped out the whole town was gone. And I insured one tow truck there. Wasn't on the news. Nobody was calling for the government. And then when it's a big enough event, the government comes in and sets up. And, again, it's if insurance would do their job, the government would have a lot less to do, right? But everybody knows that the insurance is, basically going to churn it around for 6 years. We had in the last two storms, 1 year, two storms down in South Florida, we had like 70 or 80 insureds. And we're down there meeting with them and paying their claims within weeks. That's what they need. They need to get back into business. In that case, we paid them and then a second storm came. So, that's like to insurance guys, that never happens, right? One of my own guys said, oh, no, we should go in and reduce our rates because certainly another storm isn't going to hit there. And I was like, well, now you sound like a dumb insurance guy.
Yeah.
Because it can happen, and it did happen.
Is your ability to do that, though, like arrive on site and send checks, is that because of your size? Are you able to be that nimble where your big State Farm or Travelers guys just can't do that, or they just don't do that?
Well, if they can't do it, why would they take that? I mean, I believe that's part of the problem is they're too big, right? When you write 12% of the market in Malibu, so every 12th house is yours, your house. You better make sure you're collecting enough money to pay for the catastrophe when they all go at once. So, when it's one house here and one house there, that's different. And I would tell you that, before California and Hawaii, I would have thought storms were the worst. Katrina, 100 miles. And,
Right.
the other ones that hit Naples and Fort Myers, they're big storms. But the fires, total devastation. And that I've never seen that, even in Katrina or any of the hurricanes. The old stuff is devastated if it gets hit by debris and big waves. Some of the old stuff survives.
But the recent fires are unprecedented.
Oh, yeah. No, it's like, I say it's way worse than any, hurricane I've ever seen, because new construction survives hurricanes. New construction, now everybody's building fireproof and cement. And so I think, again, we have to be smart, right? The wood stick frame buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s down in Florida, they're going to go. The big waves get up that high, it just rips them apart. Yeah, it's not going to make it. The new structures that are built 12 to 18 feet above the ocean level, and they're concrete and they're built right. I mean, Ian, the first storm, there was a whole tract of houses that were gone, and the one that was built to standard, it was
still there.
Yeah, it was, maybe minor damage. The Margaritaville hotel that we insured after Ian, it was all cleanup. They didn't have damage to the building, and that was a powerful storm. So construction, you have to look at everything. And again, I think if I could get the whole entire insurance industry to do one thing, it's like, just cover everything. Do not have multiple policies. The gaps and all of the litigation that comes with the different policies should be used to actually do the job at hand, which is repair the houses. And the insurance companies are spending the money litigating that they don't have coverage. So just bench the lawyers, give them everything they need. Again, the golden dome of protection. And you need that property. Your house is your most valuable asset. And then your business, right? You need, everything that a lawyer could allege you did wrong should be covered. And if they allege it, we should defend it. If it's a criminal act, then we can't cover the criminal act. But that's going to be one portion of it. A business doesn't normally commit a criminal act. It's one of your employees that would assault somebody.
Sure.
Did you tell them to assault them?
Right. Yeah, is liability really yours?
If that's your business, if you're a mobster and you say, go kill people.
Can you insure a mobster?
Well, you can, but at that point you couldn't, right? Because it would be a crime. So, I mean, as an insurance company, over 43 years, I have people I've insured where their enemies send you information to attack, right? And try and get you to not insure them because they're a bad apple. And I mean, I would say 98% of the time, I found that not to be true, right? But there have been occasions where they tipped me off to stuff where I was able to make the right move and get out of it. But, when you don't have personal relationships with people and, they make you go through, I call them the Wizard of Oz. Like if one of my insureds doesn't want to talk to me, they want to hide behind their lawyer, that's a red flag to me, right? I'm not going to deal with your lawyer so that you can always say you didn't understand it, right? I'm happy to talk to you and your lawyer. I just want transparency and clarity because I don't want to add the litigation that, comes from all the middlemen. So as I write and grow my business, agents and brokers don't like me talking to their client. And I'm told that all the time. And I'm like, well, if I can't talk to my insured, then I don't want to insure them. I'm not arguing that they're not your client, right? You're the agent broker, they're your client. But I'm the insurance company and they're the insured. And when shit goes wrong, we're parties to the contract. You're kind of a outlier that in most cases doesn't get involved. And when you do, they're protecting their own interest. Like, we didn't do that. We disclosed it, so, or even strategy, right? We have one claim right now where it's a $5 million limit. I wrote the primary million. The insured doesn't want to pay it. I don't want to pay it. It's a frivolous claim. The plaintiff's lawyers identified the excess carrier, $4 million. I could have done the whole $5 million, right? And then we're all on the same team. Now the plaintiff's lawyer got through the excess carrier, and they gave him a number that they might pay as much as $2 million. So now a claim that we're thinking is not worth more than $250,000. They want our $1 million because they think they got 3 total because of the excess carrier.
2 from the other guy.
I told the agent, I said, I know why you issued it separately and hid it from me, because you get paid more commission from them on the excess. And now we're all paying, we're all costing, the litigation's costing more, and the suit's a bigger case, when I could have done the whole thing. I could have done the whole $5 million. Excess policy over above me, that doesn't do me any good.
Yeah, that's not a favor to you.
Separates, it's not a favor to the insured either, because he doesn't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, but he doesn't understand, right? Would you say in that instance, the insured trusted the agent?
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
To tell him how to get it done.
Yeah.
This is the best way to do it.
Said, look, we'll do the primary $1 million with Rick. The excess we can get easy through a number of markets, but that creates another gap and another opportunity for the legal side to win. Part of what we have to do is be smart enough to eliminate the legal side and keep it under reins, or you just let them run rampant. And, that's why I think outsourcing, when I started in the insurance business, the insurance companies did everything in-house like I do. And then as litigation grew, they got rid of their in-house lawyers and outsourced to local
big firms.
And, their claims guys, their risk management, it's all outsourced now. Basically, insurance companies like Lloyds of London, they're a pile of capital. They appoint you as an MGA to be their office over here to write truckers, and another guy writes restaurants. And, so they're just the capital, and then they try and manage you, and they do business with local agents, and then local agents do business. So, most companies don't want to talk to the insured. It's almost like a bank board or a loan board, right? You go to the loan officer and they turn you down, and
sure,
can I talk to the loan committee?
No.
Oh, no. It's like, so I'm dealing with the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
You got to look at me, and I got to be up front with you, but I can't really know who the guys are behind the curtain. That's a red flag. So anyway, I guess as you get older, you get 6 cents on red flags and messages people send you without, really saying stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that we've got, in my last 20-something years of owning a business, we've had insurance claims. And even the title of your podcast is probably a sentence I've said, a million times by myself. I hate insurance. And it's because in the early days, in fact, it was my insurance agent at the time that made the joke. But he was like, every month you write me a check for your life insurance, and you're saying, I'll bet I die. And every month I cash that check and I say, I'll bet you don't. Right? And he's not wrong, right? So every month I write my, general liability and my auto and all of my stuff off to my guy, and the check goes, and I'm saying, hey, I bet I have a big problem. And they cash my check and they go, I'll bet you don't. But the hard part is in the back of my mind, I also have this thought of, if I do have a problem, I hope you show up. I hope you do. And if you don't, and you're going to identify some clause somewhere in the policy that didn't happen,
fine print.
Right? Then I'm going to be mad at my agent, but he's not liable for it, right? It's the insurance company. And now we're playing this game where I need some help. My agent can't get it for me. The insurance company doesn't want to give it to me. And we had a breakdown, an equipment issue at Critical Laser probably, 15 years ago, where Rocky Mountain Power had a power problem, and it sent kind of a brownout where they drop a leg of power to the equipment. and it cooked a bunch of the motors inside of our CNC equipment. And we first wanted with our insurance company, hey, we've got 150 grand worth of problem here. And they were like, well, you kind of have breakdown coverage, but actually we sort of don't do that because Rocky Mountain Power should have coverage because they're the ones who, it took us a year to get through it. And I think we probably got 80% of what it costs us to be down. But in my head, my theory was insurance is there to put me back where I was, if not, assuming nothing had happened. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure in any case I've dealt with insurance that I've had that happen.
Right. Well, and again, what, fries your engines or your motors, electrical surge, whatever, brown out, you need the money to get up and running. And, most policies have loss of income or loss of use. So the sooner they fix the motors, the less loss of use you have, and you manage the claim. And then if somebody else is responsible, whether it's an excavator who hit the power line or, the power company, that's something your insurance company should go seek.
Right.
Because they're your good neighbor. They're taking care of you, but none of them do that anymore. They don't ever seek. They think it's a waste of time. It's like writing off your bad debt. And as an insurance company, if you write 10% off or you go get it and do the right thing, that, to me, that's your job. You're acting like you're partners with the insured instead of reading a policy, right? And again, if you switch that around, you want, just like me with my boat, right? I was able to pay, so I didn't even want State Farm to pay. I told them, I'll pay. I just want you to help me, right? Get a lawyer and let's go after the responsible party. And their words were, we don't do boats. We do homeowners. You're going to have to manage your own claim. And I said to them, you should probably tell people that when you take their
money
application and you give them a quote, and then you take their money, you should say, by the way, we don't know what the hell we're doing. You're going to have to manage your own claim. And again, I'm fortunate enough to know how to manage my own claim. But more importantly, not all the time, but at that time, I had the money to where I could. And if you have the money, why would you waste your time on insurance, right? Without my insurance on that one, I could have gone and got 100% from Travelers the way I did, and I would have saved the premium and I wouldn't have had the extra aggravation. So, to me, being an insurance company, I know how I want to be treated, right? And I know that's the way that a good neighbor would treat you. And, again, people say, you're 10% more than the other guy. And I'm like, yeah, but I give a shit like 1,000% more, right? So 10% more for somebody who's actually going to do the right thing versus when they say, I'm never going to have a claim, I'm like, well, then you don't need me.
You don't need any insurance.
Just go buy
if you're not
the
going to
cheapest
if you're
thing.
never going to have a claim, you don't need insurance at all.
So
nobody can believe that deep in their core. I just think that, especially for young business owners, and what's interesting inside the shooting range industry, like we were talking before, a lot of the newer commercial shooting ranges coming online are retired law enforcement or other retired, business owners that, love firearms, they love the industry, and they want to have their own business, and out they come, right? And they're really naive to business insurance and what coverage could, what incidents could happen in their facility, what they could be liable for, what needs to be in their policy, what doesn't, what gaps they have. I think, a lot of people dream of owning their own business or retiring to Florida, and, they have this great plan, and then they buy shitty, crappy insurance. And I've seen the homeowners that moved to Florida before the 3 storms, and they're out of there, right? That was the worst decision they ever made because they had a bad plan. And, when you retire as a police officer, you retire and you want to start a fun business like a shooting range, and, they're really risking their retirement. And, a good plan, a good partner
with the proper, approach. And that means, again, if you're going to rent guns, you need to do it in a way where, you think ahead of the ball. Like, if I rent this guy a gun and he goes in there and shoots himself, how am I going to defend myself? Maybe, again, you have a waiting period if they've never rented from you before, right? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can delay it. If I come there and rent guns all the time and, I know the risk, and that's different than somebody you've never known before showing up at your range alone, and maybe he looks disturbed and you just rent him a gun. That's high risk.
For sure.
Right? If you say, look, we don't know you, we got to kind of do a background check, whatever you tell them, and then when you come back in the future, we can rent you a gun. Or if you're a membership organization, right? There are ways to, and again, if your attitude is, I got insurance, I can rent to anybody, that's a bad business plan. I don't care whether you're renting jet skis or construction equipment or whatever. We do exotic cars, and that's probably the most highest risk thing you do, because it's just everybody in that industry is doing things for the wrong reason. The guys loaning their cars or renting their cars to an exotic car place. Why would you do that? Why would you have a nice car and rent it? How do you think they're going to treat it? And obviously, my assumption
that's
is
where the statement, it's fine, it's a rental, right? That's where that comes from.
Yeah, so, but there's a way to do it right, too. There's some really successful clubs where, guys that have money and have nice cars, they go to Chicago and they want to drive around in a nice car, and it works really well. But you almost,
but that's different than the business of rent a Lambo on the Strip in Vegas.
That's the foreign drivers, and there's all kinds of different, unique business settings that change it. Vegas is obviously its own world, but LA, Chicago, they all have their. New Jersey has a big exotic car rental theft ring up there that's hit us a couple of times, and
really?
They just rent. And then you eventually get it back. In most cases, it's not like, they just want to change the serial number and they think they're going to get away with it. And then the FBI lets them bake themselves and then arrest them, and you get the cars back. But you've already paid for them, and, the guys have already moved on. So anyway, there's just tons of different, all 50 states, obviously firearms. State laws are different. I think it's getting better where it's getting closer. And with the federal, trend, I think getting better. But you just have to hold people accountable, just like a drunk driver. Somebody uses a firearm. And the example I always use is the, New Orleans case where the guy rented the car from Toro, Ford Bronco, and ran people over. I mean, you could sue Ford Motor for making a product
the Bronco
that somebody used in a terrible way. So, firearms. Again, I think Remington is a lesson that we can all learn from. That you need partners, not people who tell you to settle cases that damage you and the entire industry. And I know that there's some other straw purchase litigation going on now, and how that's managed and the decision those people make are going to affect the gun industry for a long time. So I've talked to them. We haven't insured any of it, but obviously the people are having trouble getting insurance now because of the claims. And that's when you learn how good your insurance is, when you're in action.
How do you think the Remington case affected firearms manufacturers? Like, did you see that? Do you think, other companies like Glock and SIG and these other manufacturers are going to have issues?
Oh, yeah.
Their policies are changing based on that type of large decision.
There's no doubt, right? And I think again, and the thing I can tell you about my 400,000 claims, I know them intimately. The 4,000 cases I've won, I know them. cases I'm not involved in, you really don't know, right? You hear little tidbits, but you don't know the whole thing. So, but when you settle a lawsuit like they settled, the threat is, if you don't pay us, we're going to bankrupt you. So the fact that they paid and went bankrupt is what I said that to the guy that was the CEO at the time. I said to him, I don't understand how that happens. That sounds like it shouldn't happen. Somebody screwed up somewhere. And he told me, we have the best insurance and the best lawyers. And I asked him who they were, and he told me, and I know them. And, again, that's why I'm sitting here, is because those people that he thinks are the best are old school, old fashioned, doing it a way that it doesn't work. That's why the stuff that I do is deemed uninsurable, which, after 43 years, I think I've proven, no, it's just a lack of desire on their part to actually do the job. It's like, do you want to move this dirt 5,000 yards from here to there? Contractor who doesn't want to do it won't take the job. But if you're just issuing a piece of paper and you think we're never going to have to move it, right, then you actually have to move it and you fail, you didn't have the best. You had, people who were happy to take your money and not really be invested in the business. And I think that is at the root of all of this. Your insurance has to be a partnership that survives the tests. If it fails every test, something's broken. And, cars they test, if they failed every time, they would never make it to, the retail side of it. Same with pilots. If you can't pass your test, they don't give you a pilot's license. So same with your driver's license. So, we like here to, number one, look up people's skirts, meaning show us your current policy and we'll review it for you, tell you what you're not covered for, which is the most important thing for you to know. And then we'll give you golden dome of protection, which, covers everything, and makes it a partnership versus, a bunch of policies where you're not sure where to report it, what's covered, what isn't covered. You should know that clearly when you buy the policy. If, again, security guard companies, they can't get assault and battery coverage. Well, that's kind of what they need.
That's
if you're a security guard company, right? You tackle some guy that's running out of the store, or you engage with people, or you shoot somebody, that's assault and battery. So, it is something that, again, insurers offering security coverage with no assault and battery. And I just tell people, I can do the assault and battery, but I'm going to have to charge you so much premium because I'm going to be fighting with them, which is a waste of money. Why don't we just write your whole policy,
do the whole policy,
including assault and battery and all the stuff you need, do the whole job, and it's going to be a lot easier. I would say the security guard business and, the firearms industry, all of it, I think is a better risk than it was 20 years ago, for sure, 10 years, because when you're under attack, you tend to be more aware of stuff you should do and you shouldn't do. When, like California Homeowners, it's cheap and no big deal. I can get it from 10 companies. Don't clean up your yard. Let the leaves pile up, your wood pile. Why would you do anything? You get cheap, stupid insurance. So, again, having this partnership approach, whether it's business or personal, if I'm going to have you send me pictures of your house, I'm going to say, dude, need to clean up
these
around
are a problem.
there. You need to get the trees 50 feet away from your structure and stuff. You live in a wildfire score 100, and if they're a good partner, they'll do it. Same with, like a range release, or, if you run a jet ski rental operation, we give you the release form, you agree to use it, then I come by to look at you and you're not using our release form, and I cancel you and you sue me claiming I put you out of business. And I'm like, well, you agreed to use our release form. My lawyer said your release form's crappy and his is better. I'm like, well, then have your lawyer insure you. if he knows so much.
Yeah.
So again, being able to, issue coverage the way that we do, like for the Rolling Stones, or give security guards armed guard coverage and assault and battery, gunsmiths. I'm getting lots of calls for gunsmiths now.
What kind of coverage is a gunsmith looking for?
Well, it's products liability on anything that he would touch. General liability.
What specific under that product liability that would be different than, a guy making watches?
Well,
is there something different you would do for a guy smithing guns than a guy smithing watches?
Well, most policies for machine shops exclude aerospace, anything to do with aircraft, anything to do with firearms.
I'm aware.
Most people, again, they'll do some gun stuff, and I'm sure the guys that compete against you, they don't have the proper coverage. They have coverage as a machine shop, not doing aircraft, not doing firearms, nothing automobile. They're doing whatever they tell them they're doing. And machine shops are like any other business, right? They make pieces and parts.
Sure.
And you might do that now. You get a firearms job. I'm not sure most of them tell their insurance agent or broker. Or if they do, they know, well, I'm not covered for it. And if the manufacturer doesn't ask them for proof of insurance, and, I'm personally aware that people buy coverage, cancel it, and then they just change the certificates themselves. They'll just change the dates. Oh, yeah. And they'll just send it back out every year, So there is nothing that, is possible that isn't done in the insurance world. And we're, I see enough variety and activity from everything that nothing surprises me.
That's probably a fair statement for as long as you've been doing insurance. I would imagine you've seen almost everything under the claim world.
Everything's possible.
Yeah. So before we were talking as before the podcast started, but you were saying there's a new policy. I don't know if you would call it supplemental, because I'm not insurance vocabulary savvy, but you're saying there's a policy you're writing for police officers that's independent of what they might be covered under their city or government policy.
Yeah. So in some states, we issue a master policy for a department, and it covers all their officers.
And some states have been getting rid of officers' qualified immunity, right? So is that where this type of insurance lands?
Colorado was the first one. And, we've written multiple police departments, sheriff's departments, university police officers. And, they only want the $25,000 because they say you had immunity, right? Now you have $25,000 of exposure.
Right.
Which, again, when an officer crosses the line, his immunity goes away. That's what I proved when I sued the city of Chicago cops. I got $200,000.
Yeah.
So,
as soon as they're outside the bounds, right? The immunity is over
to
anyhow.
To say that your immunity is gone and you have a $25,000 cap is kind of,
it's dumb.
That's proven wrong by the fact that immunity goes away. So, we normally sell a $100,000 limit. We do that individually. One of the, biggest profile ones we do is an heir to the McDonald's Happy Meal toys. So his family made all the Happy Meal toys and Happy Meals for McDonald's. And he's wealthy, doesn't have to work, but he wants to be a police officer. So he became a police officer. And before he took the job, he wanted a $5 million policy personally to cover him on top of what the city or police department did. So we do that. We do a bunch in New York and New Jersey where they're sergeants, or they're really more worried about the 10 guys on their team, right? Or the 20 guys on their team and them being sued individually. And, they've been doing it 20, 30 years, and they have a house and they have assets. So they just want, their work coverage. And again, I'm like, you really need 24/7 coverage, right? If you're moonlighting on the side, oh, well, they have coverage. They're a security guard company. I'm like, yeah, they have coverage for them, and it includes you as an employee, but it doesn't cover you individually.
Right.
It's like a bus driver, or a truck driver. The company has coverage, and it includes the driver as a driver of the company, but it doesn't cover you personally for your own acts, right? So anyway, again, monoline coverage, and you called it a rider, and in some cases that's correct if they'll add it to you, but most things are issued like now the security guard coverage I was talking about. They have a security company policy, doesn't cover armed guards, so they buy a separate policy for their armed
For those
guards,
guys.
and then they're seeking a policy for assault and battery for all their guys. And that's called monoline coverage, and I've been doing it forever. That's how we do a lot of liquor. But it's like the second best way to do it, right? The best way is find a true partner that really wants to cover you and everything you do.
For all the risk, all the things, we're going to do it all.
Security, assault and battery, because then you have this dome of protection where there's not gaps between the policies or different interests. So, that's most people like firearms. They call us, hey, I just want firearms policy like U.S. Law Shield or USCCA. And again, that's not real insurance, right? We issue, you're joining as a member under some program, and some of them have insurance behind them, but it's limited. It has a limit for the whole group of thousands and thousands of insureds. Each insured doesn't have their own limit. And some of the other ones, they promise you a defense, like prepaid legal, but they don't pay anything in the event that, you're 10% at fault and you got to pay $25,000 for the medical bill.
They're just covering the legal cost, not any judgments that might happen.
So insurance does two things. It defends you and it indemnifies you. So, the prepaid legal, they just defend you. There's no indemnification that goes along with that. And the other master policies have a group aggregate, which, 100 guys have claims. There's no more coverage for the other 6,000 or 10,000 members they have. So again, we think that's an old-fashioned cookie-cutter approach where you're, adding people to a policy, and we can do the same thing, right? Like if you're a police officer and you buy USCCA or US Law Shield for your off-duty stuff, we can do the same thing for about the same price and cover you at work. That's the biggest problem I have with most of the standalone monoline firearms protection is it only covers firearms and it doesn't cover you at work. So, that's where most people take their firearm is to work. Right?
Well,
they don't
if you're a
want to not
law
have
enforcement
it with
professional,
them.
for sure.
And, I'm talking to a lot of school districts now where they want teachers to have firearms and firearms training.
Yeah.
In their school
Utah has that new Guardian program.
Right. And, again, it's common sense. They're hitting the soft target. If they knew teachers were armed, they would go somewhere else. So, I think that that'll be a new area where we can either provide school districts and churches standalone firearms coverage, right, for them having firearms. Security is really what it is at that point. And, we do that with big habitational property owners now where they outsource the security guards. We say hire them in-house. Just make them your employees. Problem is most carriers, insurance carriers, when they write habitational, they don't write security guards. Their theory is make it have separate coverage where, again, I think, when you have 10,000 doors and you're paying a lot of money for security, you can hire better people than you're paying for, right? Because you go out to the local security guard company, most of them are unarmed, and you're paying, not a cheap rate for them. You can get off-duty police and ex-military guys that are, in my opinion, far better trained, and I would rather insure, to work for you on your site, and they're not working for other people, right? And so anytime you outsource something, one of the biggest problems in any business is finding good employees, right? So when you outsource it, you think it's easier for them to find good employees than it is for you. I don't, right?
No, it's not.
So
Yeah, it's not any easier.
Taking on and having the ability to hire your own security guard, in most cases, your insurance companies say, we can't do that. We insure your grocery store. We don't do security guards. Where I can do it, right? And I think that's the trend, again, that, we're trying to push, and I believe the whole industry should do a lot of fundamental changes like no deductibles, your risk share, don't add all these exclusions where now you're creating a whole nother layer of litigation because I don't cover that. Well, if I don't cover it, you have to. So now I'm fighting with you, and we got a third party also fighting for coverage, which is, creating more turbulence in the situation. And what you want is, a calm, soft landing. You can't change the accident that happened, but you can control your glide path after the accident and how you land. So, but again, it takes a plan and a strategy like you're a Super Bowl team, not like you're in the Super Bowl because you got the lottery ticket and you get to pick 12 guys and get your ass kicked because you weren't prepared for the fight or the opportunity or the game.
But we appreciate you guys coming on the show and checking out the I Hate Insurance podcast. And we'll see you on the next one.